Kyle would play The Champ Is Here.
Yep.
I don't know if he'd play I'm Coming Home or not, because it's an older song, and Flick loves older
songs.
jams.
Yeah.
It's just two of us today. A little bit crowded here around the holiday season, so we are going to break down UFC 232. So the first fight we're going to talk about is Curtis Millender versus Sahir Bahadurzada. And now these guys might not have a ton of name value quite yet, but make no mistake, this is a fight that you guys will definitely want to watch if you can get on Fight Pass to watch it.
Yeah. Millender's had 2-3 fights in UFC.
Yeah.
Something like that. Not many, but they've all been...
impressive.
Yeah, they've all been impressive. And Bahadurzada's been around for a while.
Yeah.
He's usually pretty good at putting on a show.
He's a super tough guy. When you watch Sahir Bahadurzada, he's very durable. I'm trying to think of another guy that's kind of like a Clay Guida, but Clay Guida kind of back in the day where he's just grimy. Like, he's very hard to put away. And so with this fight, Millender's been really good at just finding ways to put people out recently. And so I think when you have a guy that's going to be explosive and fast, kind of like Millender, versus a guy that's really durable and able to eat a lot of shots like Sahir Bahadurzada, can really lead for one of those kind of slugfests, which should be really interesting to watch. So
I think that it's going to be a real interesting matchup as far as things go, because Millender's kind of willing to eat shots, to deliver shots.
Yep. Because most of the time when he's doing that, he's getting the better shots because he's got a little bit more power, just a little bit more explosiveness behind his punches. So
yeah, Bahadurzada on the other hand kind of picks his spots a little more.
Yeah.
And he has, I think, a more well-rounded game as far as his grappling. Millender's kind of he kind of wants to dictate where it's going. He wants to keep it on the feet, land some bombs. He doesn't really gas out. He actually, most of his wins are actually by decision.
Yeah.
So, I mean, a gas tank isn't really a worry with him.
Yep.
As far as how I think this fight is going to go, Bahadurzada hasn't faced the names that Millender has.
And Bahadurzada, if I'm not mistaken, hasn't fought too frequently as of late.
I think, for me, Bahadurzada, he doesn't take as many strikes. He only eats about 2 strikes a minute, whereas Millender is closer to 5. I think between that, Millender doesn't have a great takedown defense. Bahadurzada has a high takedown success. I think that he's going to grind his way out to a submission in the second round is what I have.
That's completely different from what I was thinking potentially with Millender. I think as a guy that has that explosive power, that he's going to come out strong early. I think he's going to land some good shots on Bahadurzada early. And so because of that, he's going to be a little bit more timid in the first round. Millender's going to take the first round. In the second round, I think Millender's going to do enough in the beginning to kind of outstrike him and to land a few good shots on him. But then I think what the problem's going to be is that, well, at least from Bahadurzada's standpoint, I think he's going to get 2 behind on the scorecards between 1 and 2. And I think Bahadurzada's going to have the better gas tank in the third and take him down and grind him out. But I don't think that it's going to be enough. So I have Millender winning the first 2 rounds. I think he's going to get tired in the second half of the second round, and Bahadurzada will take over the third. But Millender will win via decision by taking the first 2 rounds. And then
Next
on to
Team Turtle.
One of my favorite fighters that has been rather disappointing as of late. He came off The Ultimate Fighter with one of the nastiest knockouts I've ever seen. And he had a little bit... He showed some promise there for a little bit when he knocked out Gegard Mousasi. But then that fight ran back. And ever since then, it's been a little bit downhill. And hence why he's fighting Bevan Lewis, a guy that's coming off the Contender Series, right?
Yeah, he fought twice on there. He won both of them by TKO. So, I mean, hard to say what competition level he faced there, though.
Right. And so I think potentially what the UFC is trying to do here, they're setting up a guy that if he were to knock out Uriah Hall has a little bit of name value in the sense that he's had some really impressive knockouts in his career. And he has a very high potential that he just hasn't managed to reach yet. So if Bevan Lewis comes on and knocks him out, it looks great for them to catapult him and to sell him. But at the same time, if Uriah Hall can go out there and add another highlight reel knockout, then he's back into potentially fighting, ranked and higher ranked
where he
opponents
should be
again.
fighting.
Yeah.
Yeah. he's, like you said, he's been having a rough go of it.
Yeah.
He's kind of a head case, if I'm being honest.
He is.
He
overthinks things a lot.
Yeah, he has all the talent in the world, but he's his own worst enemy. Where
Yep.
if he thinks too much about it and psychs himself out, then he can't. He just doesn't show up.
Yep.
I don't really know any other than his 2 wins on Contender Series. I don't really know anything about Lewis. He's undefeated.
Yep.
But, I mean.
Yeah, but he's a young gun going in against a guy who has a lot of tools to be able to put him away. And I'm still going to be faithful to Uriah Hall. I still think he's going to win this fight. I would like to see it in the first round, but if not, I think it happens by the first 2 minutes in the second round. I think it'll be an early stoppage for Uriah Hall. At least I'm hoping.
Yeah, I'm thinking the same thing. Hall has lost a lot, but he hasn't really lost to anybody. I mean, through his whole career, he only really loses to the top of the division guys.
Yeah. He lost to Gegard Mousasi, recently Paulo Costa. I know there's at least 1 or 2 others.
Did he fight Whitaker?
I think he may have.
Yeah, I think Whitaker beat him.
Yeah, so... But he's fighting the top of that middleweight division.
Yeah.
Very tough guys that are either belt holders or title contenders.
Yeah.
So
I have Hall winning by second round knockout. I don't know enough about Bevan Lewis to even take him in a chance of an upset.
Yep.
So I'm gonna roll with Hall. I think that this isn't the kind of opponent he loses to.
I agree.
First on the free prelims is BJ Penn, Ryan Hall. And Ryan Hall he won the Ultimate Fighter in 2015.
I don't even remember what season that was.
Connor and Faber.
Is that 22?
It might have been 22, 23, somewhere in there.
Yeah. I guess one thing I might say about this early is, so if people are wondering why BJ Penn is coming back to fight, I don't know the answer to that. But in terms of coming back to fight someone, it makes sense that he would come back and fight a guy like Ryan Hall.
As opposed to a Yair Rodriguez.
Yeah. Wasn't the best plan from BJ, being that he's a little bit older, a little bit slower, not as agile to fight one of the most active and agile strikers in the UFC, let alone that division.
Right.
But Ryan Hall is not that guy. He doesn't throw a lot of strikes. He is by no means a striker. He is 100%. His game plan is to get a hold of you or get you on the ground. He'd probably prefer you on the ground, but one way or another, he's just trying to grab a limb and submit you. That's his whole game plan.
Yep. He's a smaller Damian Maia for sure, because if he can't get a hold of you, he's just going to backpack you for 3 rounds.
That's what he did on the Ultimate Fighter. A lot of guys didn't want to fight him on tough, not because he was super dangerous or because he had a super, big experience base in MMA. It's just he's a very, very elite Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu practitioner within the MMA community, and he would get a hold of he has a really good leg game.
Yeah,
he does
he
some
likes
very
that half
weird
and half position.
And he will crawl at you with his legs to try to get a hold of your leg. He's very good when it comes to that half and half game in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and so that's why BJ Penn is willing to fight him. So what it takes to beat a guy like Ryan Hall is either have to be even more well-rounded at Jiu-Jitsu, which I'm afraid I don't think BJ Penn will be, in my personal opinion. Or you have to be a guy with great takedown defense with way better hands than Ryan Hall, which is definitely the easier of those two,
right,
in my opinion. And I just don't think that BJ's going to have the clean enough hands to A, either catch him, or B, be slick enough in his jiu-jitsu to avoid some of the stuff that Ryan Hall's going to be able to throw at him.
I differ. I think he was one of the first, outside of the Gracies, first really high-level Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu guys in the UFC. I'm not saying that he's a killer on the ground.
Right.
But I think he's going to be good enough defensively to pick out a decision win. I think that he'll avoid those. I don't think Ryan Hall is going to be able to take him down. And I think he'll be good enough with his jiu-jitsu to avoid those half and half positions. So I think he'll just kind of pick his spots and land some jabs and some crosses. Nothing real heavy, but I think he'll outwork him enough to get a decision win in this one.
Fair enough. Yeah, don't get me wrong. I don't want anything poor to happen to BJ. I've loved watching BJ, but just he's in that category of fighters now that I don't even want to watch them fight anymore just because I don't want anything to happen to them. But in my opinion, I think Ryan Hall in the second round will manage to take his back and get a submission one way or the other.
Fair enough.
Ooh, this next one is one of the harder ones for me to choose. What, Silva de Andrade is like 25-2, or is that what the UFC's record said he was 25-2? Is that accurate?
Yeah, he's 25-2. 3-2 in the UFC.
And then Peter Yan is what, like 11-1?
10-1.
10-1.
2-0 in the octagon.
2-0 in the octagon. So this one I struggled with because Peter Yan has, when you look at his stats, it seems like he's got more credentials in striking and finishing people. But the thing is I don't know enough about how he fights and how Andrade fights to be able to see how they match up stylistically. So here, on one end, I have a guy that has some really impressive stats of being able to finish guys. And on the other hand, I have a guy that's got twice the amount of fights, still a really good record. I don't know if that experience is going to be enough to carry him to a victory over a guy like Peter Yan.
Right. I think the thing with Silva de Andrade is he has 19 knockouts, but I don't think any of those have come since he left whatever the Brazilian promotion he was fighting in. So it's kind of like how people were calling out Khabib for being 22-0, but
right,
16 of those fights were against scrubs. I think for me, Peter Yan he has a really high output.
Mm-hmm. He throws a lot of strikes.
Yeah, he lands almost 7 strikes a minute. He doesn't really take a whole lot of damage. De Andrade, he takes more strikes than he lands, and against somebody like Yan, that can be really dangerous. I think that, with all things considered, De Andrade has faced a little bit higher competition and beaten them, but just being I haven't watched a ton of their fights.
Right.
Just going strictly based off of the numbers on this one, Yan's look more impressive. His numbers look more impressive. Yeah. It looks like on paper that he should take this one. I have it by decision just because Andrade hasn't been knocked out at all. So I don't think I don't know if Yan will be the first one to do that.
I agree with the decision. But just to carry on the theme of us actually disagreeing on pretty much who we think is going to win each fight, I'm going to go with the experience of Silva de Andrade to carry him to a slight edged-out victory, potentially even a split decision. And this could be fight of the night candidate.
Yeah, it really looks like
Granted, there are a lot of potential barn burners on this fight, but I think this could definitely be a fight where you get your quote-unquote money's worth with a free fight on this one.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
I'll let you go. I know I have a very distinct way that I think I see this fight going, at least in my opinion. I'll be curious to see. I think you're going to actually have a different idea than I do on this one as well. So,
Megan Anderson, this is her second fight in the UFC.
Yep.
Lost to Holly Holm in June. Not that that's a huge knock. A lot of people have lost to Holly. The big thing that I took from that fight, though, was Holly Holm just continuously took her down and controlled the action, which has never really been her game.
Yep.
And that kind of falls exactly into what Kat wants to do. And Kat's got some power when she gets you to the ground. Right. So if she can take Megan down, she could put a whooping on her. Now, I mean, some of these numbers are skewed because of the stats that we get are off of the UFC's website.
Yeah.
So they only are stats from their actual UFC fights. Being Megan Anderson only has one fight in the UFC.
Yep.
She doesn't have a high land percentage. Like, she doesn't land a lot of strikes. She took a lot of damage. But again, you go back and look at her other fights in Invicta, that hasn't really been the case. Yeah. But just the fact that she struggled with a non-wrestler in Holly Holm keeping her off of her, I think if Kat Zingano gets in on her hips, that she's going to be in for a long night.
Yeah.
I'm a Megan Anderson fan, but I think Kat's going to control where this fight takes place. And I have it going to a decision, but it very well could be a second or third round finish too. unless Anderson's grappling has just improved leaps and bounds. I just think that Zingano's got the tools to dictate this fight from beginning to end.
Yep. And so, where I see the flip side of this going is that going into that Holly Holm fight, this was Megan Anderson's first fight in the UFC and against a rather big name in Holly Holm. I mean, she has a legacy behind her of being the one with that crazy head kick knockout over Ronda Rousey. And so I think Megan came out a little bit flat in that fight. I think she had a lot of anticipation and a lot of nerves riding on her in that first UFC appearance. And so another thing with the fight with Holly is that I don't think Megan expected any of the takedowns, and she had to be weary of Holly's striking, and so that really opened up that ground game for Holly in that fight with Megan. And so what I think the difference will be here is Megan expects this to go to the ground. Well, she expects that that's what Kat wants this to do. And so being a much taller, longer fighter, I think Megan will be a little bit more composed going in there, and I think that since Kat is much shorter and a little bit stockier, I think Megan's going to use her range. I think she's going to kind of hit and move and stay away from her. And I think just because of that, she's just going to frustrate Kat. Kat's going to have to take ugly shots. She's not going to get them. And then Megan will slowly just land more technical striking on her while she's trying to close the distance. And I kind of see that happening for 3 rounds. I don't think she's going to be able to clip her and finish her. Kat's a really tough woman in that division. And so I think because of that, I see it as a decision, but I think Megan's going to be able to use her range and her length effectively to be able to keep it at a distance that she wants that fight to go in, and I think she's going to take the decision.
Next, we got Arlovski versus Walt Harris.
This is also one that's like super hard for me to pick. One, because Walt Harris is a guy that is either going to knock you out or he's probably going to lose a decision.
Yeah, he's 11-7. All 11 wins are by knockout.
Yep. And so the thing with Arlovski is, now going back to when we watched him in Chicago, I know he's fought since then, but when we watched him fight Tai Tuivasa in Chicago, I personally thought he won that decision. I thought he was going to win that fight. And not that Tai and Walt Harris are similar fighters, but they are guys that usually
like
if they win, it's because they knocked you out. And so Arlovski's been in the game for a while. He is a little bit older. He has been knocked out several times in his career. But there's just something about when I watch Andrei Arlovski that it seems like when he fights these guys that you don't expect him to be competitive against, especially in these last couple fights where he's come back. I've been really impressed with him. And so because of that, I think he might get clipped early. I think he will recover. And I think Arlovski is going to just pour it on in the second and third round and pull off a decision because I think Harris is going to get tired trying to finish him early in that first round.
Yeah, I've been bouncing back and forth on this one. It's Arlovski's chin, man. Like, you're not confident depending on that to get you a win.
Yeah.
But like you said, against the Tai Tuivasa, somebody that we all went in expecting him to just floor him. He seems to find a way to out-technique these power punchers. But for me, I'm kind of taking a gamble here because everything that my head is saying is, and everything I've seen from Arlovski tells me he's going to win. He should win because this is he's just not, he's got better cardio, he's more technical, but at what point does one of these guys find his chin and put him out? So just based off of that, I think that I went with Walt Harris, but I'm not confident in that. I mean, if I was betting on this, I'm probably taking Arlovski just because that's where the smart money is at. But for me, he's 39 years old. He's been knocked out. It's only a matter of time before one of these power punchers finds his chin. Yeah.
So. Harris is definitely the more dangerous fighter going into this, and Arlovski is definitely more experienced. So it's just one of those matchups that if Arlovski's chin could hold up, I think he's going to be able to have the skills and the knowledge to be able to get it done.
Yep.
But he can't get hit. Mendes versus Volkanovski.
This is another one that I struggled to decide which way I want to go on it. I'm a big Chad Mendes fan. I always have been. I like the way he fights. He's very well-rounded. He's got big power in that right hand. Volkanovski's kind of an unknown for me, though.
Yep.
He lands a lot of strikes. He has 10 knockouts in his career. He only has 1 loss, but it is by knockout.
Yep.
The big thing for me going into this was, I think Volkanovski I think he's a little bit of a wrestler, too.
Okay.
Not real.
Yeah, I don't know a whole lot about his actual fighting style.
Me either. But his last fight was against Darren Elkins. So, I mean, this is a big step up
jump.
in competition.
Yeah.
If he is a wrestler, again, I'm not super familiar with him, but he's not. Chad's never been taken down in his professional career, ever. So, he could have a tough go of it that way. Just based off of the fact, I'm probably going to come off a little bit like a homer here, but I'm really familiar with Mendes. Don't know a whole lot about what Volkanovski brings other than he is a high striker.
A lot of strikes, yeah.
Yeah. I don't know if he's going to be able to knock out Mendes, and I think Mendes probably has the better overall game to take a decision.
Yep.
I have Chad winning with a second-round TKO, though. I think that if he can land a big right hand, he'd put Volkanovski in trouble and finish him.
See, I see the same type of fight occurring, and so with this, I'm similar to you in the sense that I don't know a ton about Volkanovski, but I've looked through his stats. He seems like a high output kind of guy. But when I look at the guys that he's fought, I don't recognize anyone that's going to have the grappling prowess that Mendes does. And so because of that, Mendes' first fight back in a while was earlier this year.
In July.
And so I think he's going to be very interested in getting back on track and putting his name up there at that, especially if Max Holloway is going to be moving up.
Yeah.
I think he's definitely want to get his name up there. He's going to want to move up as quickly as possible. So I think he's going to go out there and try to put on a super dominant performance for this. And so I think he's going to go out. He might be a little bit slow to get a takedown in the first, but I think eventually he's going to get one. And I actually see him. I can understand a finish coming in. I see him grinding him out for 3 full rounds, super dominant, potentially 10-8s in the second and third round. To win this fight against Volkanovski.
Yeah, and he could very easily get a submission win, too. All those alpha male guys are...
Yeah.
They're known for getting that guillotine out of nowhere, so, I mean, if he grabs a hold of that...
And it's common, if he gets to the point where he's getting the better grappling of Volkanovski, and Volkanovski's just trying to get out, it's very easy to transition to get someone's back whenever they're panicking just to trying to get up to their feet. And it's usually pretty easy for those guys that are so good at wrestling to sink in a rear naked. So.
Yep. Ilir Latifi, Corey Anderson.
Yeah, so in all honesty, this is probably the most lackluster fight on this card.
This one definitely has the most potential to be a snoozer.
Yeah, and because of this, so you have Corey Anderson, who typically likes to wrestle when he fights. And so you have a guy with Ilir Latifi that has a pretty good takedown defense, and he's a rather short guy at 205.
He's another one that's never been taken down in the UFC.
Yeah, so he's rather short, but he tends to be a somewhat effective striker. So I'll be very curious to see against going against a guy like Corey Anderson, who usually he's going to be the taller, longer fighter, but he usually goes for takedowns. So by him potentially trying to cut off that distance and get a hold of Ilir, that might actually put him right in that dangerous range where Ilir's trying to strike with him. And so I just think Latifi's takedown defense is going to be too good, and I think he's going to be more dangerous on the feet. And I see this one going to decision as well, with Ilir winning via decision. But Anderson has gotten knocked out recently, and
3 of his 4 career losses are by knockout.
And I would not put it past Latifi to want to knock him out, to throw his name back up there, especially with this new belt coming in at 205.
Yep. I think very similarly to you. I think Latifi's takedown defense is going to pretty well stymie anything that Anderson wants to do. Take out his main tool in fighting. Anderson does have a higher output striking, but he doesn't really land heavy strikes.
No.
So I mean, if he tries to get into boxing range and Latifi throws that overhand right, left, whatever, I can't remember. I want to say he is a southpaw. I'm not
I don't
sure.
even remember.
But I think he, coming into boxing range, he'll land a big shot. And, I mean, Corey Anderson's been knocked out by, I think, Shogun recently.
Yeah, and Jimmy Manoa. Jimmy Manoa put him out as well.
Yeah, so I think that I got first round knockout. I think Latifi might come out, hit a bomb before Anderson even has gotten a feel for the octagon and put him out, be the end of it. All right.
And then on to one of my...
Team Turtle captain.
One of my all-time favorite fighters who always finds himself fighting guys that have a key skill that he lacks. And that is advanced grappling. And not that Condit, I'm not knocking, I mean, I kind of am knocking.
He's got 13 submission wins on his record, man.
I know, but there's just something about when the other person is just a little bit more well-versed in jiu-jitsu that Condit does not fare well. And I want to see Condit get back to the top of the welterweight division. I thought, going back to when he fought Robbie Lawler for the belt, that 5-round, I think it even might have been a split decision. I thought Condit won that hands down. But to get back into how I see this fight going is, I think that as the first fight at 170 for Michael Chiesa, but Chiesa is always going to be looking for that submission. He wants that guillotine. He wants the rear naked. He wants your neck.
Yep.
And so against a guy like Condit, I think Condit, and even though Chiesa's moving up to 170, he's a tall guy. I don't know if he's any shorter than Condit, and if he is, it's probably only by an inch or so.
Condit's 6'2", Chiesa's 6'1".
Yeah, I knew that Chiesa was over 6 foot, and so because of that, I think Condit's going to use his range in the beginning and try to keep Chiesa at bay. But I think eventually, inevitably, Chiesa is going to be able to kind of clinch up with him. Even if Chiesa were to pull guard, I still think that's a more comfortable position for him, and I think Condit would be potentially nervous in that. And so I don't want to watch Condit lose again, but against someone that has the jiu-jitsu prowess that Chiesa does, I think in the second round, Chiesa's going to manage to get a hold of him. I think Condit's going to scramble to get away. Chiesa takes his back and locks in a rear naked choke.
Yeah. I agree with everything you said. Condit's a fun guy to watch. Yeah. But, I mean, he just, for some reason, the UFC just keeps feeding him to these grapplers, man.
Yeah, and even the fight with Oliveira didn't necessarily have to be a grappling match, but he lost via submission in that. When he fought Damian Maia, that's a tough fight. He got taken down early, and then he got backpacked. What are you going to do? And I'm just nervous that that's exactly what's going to happen in this fight. I don't want to see it happen. I'd rather see him stand and pick apart Chiesa on his feet, because when he's standing, he is awesome to watch him work. But I just think it's inevitable that Chiesa is going to close that distance, and I don't think that Condit's going to be able to keep him away and to get him off of his back. So
yeah, the way I see this going is because Chiesa kind of likes to test himself on the feet. So I think the first round he's going to kind of see how he squares up as far as stand-up game goes. But I think once Condit starts picking him apart a little bit, I think he gets a takedown later in the round. There won't be enough time for him to finish there, but I think it comes out in the second, takes it straight to the ground, and gets a guillotine, rear naked choke, something. Yeah. I think I got second round sub.
Yep. Now on to
co-main event.
What we have has potential for the best female fight that we have ever seen in the UFC.
Which is saying something, considering Shevchenko and Joanna just threw down 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, it's some of my favorite fights, female fights especially, to watch have been the Joanna and Rose fights. Yeah. I think those are super fun to watch, those two strikers go back and forth. And so this is, I think, a similar fight to that, the Joanna and Rose type style, except with 30 additional pounds thrown in there.
Yeah. These Cyborg's just a monster. Yeah. Even at 45, like even if you had a legitimate 45 division, she would still be way bigger than all.
Yeah, from what I've heard about what people say when she goes into camp is that she usually goes into camp weighing around like 170 pounds, which is just insane to think about. But I'm sure that Nunes will obviously put on weight for the fight, but as someone that's used to cutting to 35. And I think you actually, we spoke about this a little bit earlier, and I think you have a pretty good insight on what that could potentially do with Nunes moving up to 145. So
yeah, before she won the belt, she came out hot, landed bombs, But if you could survive that early onslaught, she would wear down, and then that's where you would see, like, Kat Zingano knocked her out because took her down in the third round and just pummeled her on the ground. Like, before she won that belt, she had kind of a Conor McGregor.
Yeah.
If you could survive to the midpoint of the fight, then start firing back, you kind of just broke her will.
Yeah.
I don't know where she was training at the time, but I want to say that if she wasn't, then that kind of changed when she went to ATT.
Yeah.
Where they kind of fixed that problem. Maybe not fixed her gas tank, but
It improved upon it.
How to better utilize her energy instead of blowing her load at the early part of the fights, being able to spread it out over 5 rounds. But again, to bring up Conor, I think her carrying that extra 10 pounds is going to be similar to the first time Conor fought Nate, where he packed on all that weight and then didn't work on his cardio really.
They were so used to having a certain weight behind all their punches, and when you add that additional weight and that additional power that you have to throw into each shot, it can slowly diminish your gas tank more and more than you actually expected it to.
Yeah, especially when you're not cutting as much, because at least I'm not a professional fighter. I've never been in any kind of professional training camp, but as far as me right now, it's like, oh, I don't have to cut that extra 10 pounds. I can slack a little bit on my cardio training then. So I think that extra 10 pounds is going to be a detriment to her. Now, she could do what Conor did in the second Nate fight and come and weigh in at 140 pounds.
Yeah, or maybe she weighs 145, but she's not like Cyborg that's going to weigh 145 and come into the octagon at like 160.
Yeah. But as far as what I just really see it going, that extra 10 pounds is going to be more of a detriment than a help to her. I just really think it's going to affect her gas tank. Even looking at the numbers, Cyborg lands almost 2.5 strikes more a minute. Absorbs. They take about the same amount of strikes a minute, but Cyborg's is at a lot lower percentage than Nunes is.
And the thing about those Cyborg strikes is there's that little bit extra power on each one of those that she throws. When it comes to significant strikes, or if you want to talk about damage and things of that nature, I think going strike for strike against someone like Cyborg isn't going to be how you win that fight, and I think that's what Nunes is probably going to try to do. I think she's going to think in her mind that she's this super technical striker. She fought Ronda, she fought Misha, she's beat Valentina twice, kinda.
Twice.
So I think she's going to go in there thinking that she has the same striking ability as Cyborg, but what I think is going to happen, it's going to be the reverse effect. Normally when Nunes gets hit there and they feel how hard she hits at 35, that kind of makes other fighters hold back on getting in those big exchanges. I think that's going to happen to her against someone like Cyborg, who's just going to be the bigger fighter. I think she's going to go in there, they're going to trade some shots, and she might land a good one, but Cyborg's going to land a better one, and that's going to be in her mind for the rest of the night. And I'm still unsure. I have Cyborg winning this fight, but I'm just still unsure if I think Cyborg's going to finish her, or if I think... Because I think come the 4th round, if Cyborg dominates the way I anticipate her to dominate, I don't know if Nunes is going to have enough energy, in all honesty, to be able to continue on with the fight. So, because of that, I'm going to go with a late 3rd round stoppage for Cyborg.
Okay. Yeah, I think the same. Nunes, I mean, you look at her strike, not that she's not a technical striker, but she's got a little more brawl to her game, where she's kind of like more winging punches. But Cyborg, especially for women's MMA, I mean, MMA itself is only 25 years old.
Yeah.
Women's MMA is not even 10.
Yeah.
So the fact that Cyborg can come in there and her striking looks just super technical. I mean, she outboxed Holly Holm, who was a professional boxer.
Yep.
I just think that, and not only that, she's really good at finding that halfway point where she can put out a high volume, but each shot still has power on it too. I think the same thing as you. I have a round 4 knockout. I think that gas tank is gonna be a problem for Nunes, because I think she's gonna come out, she's gonna try and pour it on early, and it's going to get her in trouble.
Yep.
Cyborg, because Cyborg was similar early in her career too, where she would kind of gas out as fights went on, but you're just not gonna you're not gonna knock her out. So she would just get super far ahead and then coast. Yep. She's gotten really good since she started training with what's his name? Jason Perillo.
The dude that slaps the shit out of her.
Jason Perillo, I think is his name.
I don't know.
I could be wrong on that. The guy that trained Bisping is her coach too.
Oh, okay.
Since he started working with her, she's gotten really good at not going all out. And she's still hitting you heavy, but she's not putting everything behind every punch. I think that she's just going to wear down Nunes for 4 rounds, and then in the 4th round, Nunes is going to break, and that'll be the end of it.
Yeah. Makes sense. And now on to the rematch and the return.
Honestly, might be probably not the most anticipated rematch, just because of there's not as much bad blood between this as there was with Jones and DC. But
true,
from an actual fight standpoint,
this was Jones' closest fight.
Yeah, easily his closest fight.
That fight was kind of like, well, minus the whole ending, but when Silva fought Chael, and Chael put it on him, and he did not expect that. Now, granted, I think he caught a sub towards the end.
Yeah, caught a triangle fight in the 5th.
Yeah, but this fight is so interesting. It has so much going into it because they had that original fight, and in that original fight, it's a very close fight. I think you can score it for either guy depending on what lens you're looking at it through. Gus definitely had the better hands. He was outstriking him from that standpoint that his jab, his boxing was way cleaner and way quicker than Jones. Jones threw a lot of kicks. He dominated the kicking game of that, and he threw in a few of his spinning back elbows, especially the one, I think it was in the 4th that he caught him with, that really hurt him. And so I think that will be a similar fight than what we will see.
Yeah.
I think the most impressive thing about that first fight was the fact that Gus kind of pulled a Jones on him, and usually Jones was so good at taking you down at weird times in which you didn't expect it, but he could not take down Gus. And Gus, granted, he took him down I think one time, but Gus had 2 takedowns, even though he didn't really pursue them too often, but he did take down Jones at least twice in that fight, and Jones was actively going after takedowns, and Jones has that same game plan sometimes, like against DC. You would expect DC to be able to take Jones down and dominate him, but he couldn't, and Jones actually got takedowns on DC.
Right.
And I'm really curious to see what kind of game plan John brings after this, several years off. And in my opinion, if Jones comes back anything like he did after that last super long, he had the long layoff and then fought DC, right. But when he had the initial layoff and fought OSP, he looked terrible.
Yeah,
Jones
he did not look
cannot show up against Gus the way he showed up against OSP. Gus
wasn't there a late change in
that?
that? Wasn't he supposed to come back against DC and DC got hurt or something?
I don't remember.
I want to say that OSP was a late replacement because I think that was part of the reason why I thought he looked
Was
so
he supposed to fight Rumble back then?
No.
He was never.
That was when he originally got stripped. He was supposed to fight Rumble. I want to say he was supposed to fight DC in that fight, and then he got switched because I think I remember thinking that he trains at Jackson's, who's a big game plan oriented gym, and that may have contributed to why he looked so bad.
I don't remember enough about the backstory of that fight.
Yeah, I'm not positive on that.
All I remember from watching that fight was that, wow, Jones looks like he looked as fluid as he normally is in that cage and so creative in how he strikes.
He looked stiff.
He looked very stiff and looked very unsure about what he wanted to do. And so, now granted, neither one of these guys have been super active. Gus has only fought a few times since he fought Jones.
He's
back
like
then.
a once-a-year fighter.
Yeah. And a lot of the times when people talk about this fight, they talk about how John is so tall at 205, but Gus matches that height. He's even a little bit taller, but Jones still has the reach. He's got those really long arms.
Yep.
But I think Jones is going to take this fight. And I think he's going to win it via decision. I think Gus is going to be very tough to finish. He got finished by the likes of Rumble. But anyone gets hit by Rumble, there's a decent
You're going
chance
to
that you're
sleep.
going out. So, I think this is going to go to a decision. And now, personally, I used to be a big Jones fan. After everything that he's gone through outside of the octagon and watching how he's kind of carried himself, especially through these trials and everything, not a big fan of Jones anymore. I rather dislike the guy. I would love to watch Gus go in there and pick him apart to an even heightened level that he did in that first fight.
Yep.
But in my opinion, Jones just has an ability and an athleticism to him that's just super hard to contend with just his natural raw talent. And so I think that's actually going to carry him to a decision win over Gus yet again.
I agree. There are some factors that I've been thinking about. That first fight, you could tell that Gustafsson wasn't really prepared for a 5-round fight. His gas tank, he wore down as the fight went on.
He did get very tired, especially in that 4th and 5th.
Yeah. On the reverse side of that, Jones said he didn't have a training camp at all during that fight. He just partied for the whole time leading up to that fight. Which, if you know anything about John Jones, could very well be the case.
May or may not be true, because he probably was partying, but at the same time, Jones is definitely one of those guys that will make excuses about things.
Right.
So it's a tough sell on whether or not to believe him, but it's definitely in the realm of possibility that he spent a lot of time partying.
Yeah. Supposedly, he's recommitted himself to MMA, to jiu-jitsu, to everything. And he's, supposedly staying clean.
Mm-hmm.
But and on the reverse side of that, Gustafsson's gas tank has definitely improved because his last fight against Glover, which was a year and a half ago, but he knocked him out in the 5th round. Mm-hmm. So he's definitely improved that part of his game. Plus, I think in that fight against DC, he stayed competitive through the late rounds of that fight.
I would agree with that.
This is all stuff that doesn't really make a difference. It's just things I've been thinking about. Rogan and Brendan Schaub always bring up this one point that kind of intrigues me, is that Jones could be that kind of athlete that almost needs that chaos in his life to thrive, where if things are too calm, it kind of has the opposite effect of what you would think it has. So, it's, like I said, this isn't really any... This could all be just meaningless.
Yeah.
But it's just things that kind of run through my head as I'm thinking about it. Based off of the things that I have seen, though, you can't pick against Jones, really.
It's very hard.
It's very hard to pick against Jones. I have him winning by a decision. I don't think he's not a knockout guy. I don't think he's going to knock out Gus. Maybe he'll catch him in a submission, but most likely I see it going to a decision. But if the Jones that showed up in the OSP fight comes, then he's going to be in trouble.
In a world of hurt against a guy like Gus.
Yeah. There's a lot of variables with this fight.
Yep.
Very many ways I could see this ending. But you got to go off what you've seen. And I think if you get a Jones that is committed and has that hunger again, I think he could be a real problem for Gustafsson. And so I've got Jones winning by a decision. For me, it's just too hard to pick against the guy.
I agree. The things that he has going for them outweigh those things that hinder him and hold him back. Mm-hmm. And so, at that point, like you said, he's just a really hard guy, especially raw talent-wise, to choose against. And so that will set, most likely, new belt coming. So this sets, at least visually, well, there's definitely going to be a new belt holder, but they're rumored it's going to be a physical new belt. And so that will set the stage for how 205 kind of plays out over this next year. And
maybe
to sell a little bit of what we have coming up. So we did predictions early at the beginning of the year of who we thought was going to hold belts in 2018. And so we will have a video following up of what each of our division selections were of who we thought was going to hold the belt.
Yep.
We'll be doing the same thing for 2019. So, videos to come soon, and potentially a MMA-specific channel that we're going to be posting to.
Yeah, we're working on a name. If you guys have any suggestions, throw them out there.
Yes.
We're kind of struggling to come up with one. We've got a lot of ideas, but not one that we can all agree upon. So, if you guys have any suggestions, definitely throw them out there. Whenever we have that page set up, we'll
link you guys over.
We'll link you guys to it, or we'll put it. We're gonna have a Twitter page, Facebook page. We'll have the works. But like as always, like, subscribe. Any feedback you got.
If you're watching this and you have opinions on who you think is going to win each fight, please put in the comments of who you see winning each fight and via how. Very curious to see how people that watch this think of what our predictions are and whether they agree with them or whether they're thinking the complete opposite.
Yep.
A lot more videos coming up, especially with all of these ESPN Plus cards coming up at the beginning of 2019.
Yeah, we're going to be busy from January to March, that's for sure.
All right, more videos coming, guys. Stick around and watch. Thank you.